do you think institutions view, what do you mean institutional buying, view safe banking the same way you kind of described how it's not really the solution? Therefore, if there is some sort of like passage with safe banking, that this still remains a retail play? Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Traded Black podcast. As usual, I am your host, Shad Dales. Today we're talking cannabis and more specifically safe banking. What's the latest news? There's now a hearing scheduled for May 11th, and investors are wondering, oh gosh, this again? While others are saying, hey, there could be a shot this time. So is it true or not? Let's bring in our two guests this week. He is the president, managing partner of Pelorus Equity Group, Rob Sechrist, back to the podcast. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Good. Hope you had a big umbrella a couple weeks ago in Miami. Was that not crazy?
Buddy, we were on our way into the airport, and I looked over to the runway, and I could see the landing gear of the planes underwater. And I was like, I can't believe they haven't delayed or canceled the flight. And then we couldn't even get into the airport, which was good because we would have been stuck in the airport for the next 24 hours because you just couldn't get out of there.
Was the water that high?
Buddy, I got pictures to show you. Yeah, it was good. So on
I didn't realize it was that high.
Peripheral edges, the cars were completely underwater, and as you got to the high center, it was this. I think that airport is kind of humped probably by a foot or two towards the middle, but there was planes towards the edges that the landing gear, the tires were underwater. That was crazy.
Well, Ben, you were busy doing business. Wise decision to stay home because that week in Canada, it was sunny and 75 degrees. So who's the smart one here, right, Ben?
Yeah, I think I'm the smart one. I was mentioning to Rob off camera that I got lucky here. We actually had better weather here in suburbs of Toronto, Canada than you did in Miami, which is very hard to believe. But next time I look forward to being there.
I think Rob, the first 10 minutes, says we're going to do our presentation and then we're on a plane and heading back to sunny Southern California. But you guys actually saw a lot of rain earlier this year too. But enough of the rain. When it rains, it pours. Safe banking, making news yet again. Rob, you and I were actually at a fundraiser at Jason Wild's place in Miami. We spoke with Congressman Dean Phillips. We talked a little bit about that in our interview while we were in Miami. But for viewers that didn't see that previous interview, what did you find was the topic of conversation at Jason's place with Dean and the big takeaway regarding that pertaining to safe banking?
Yes, there was two things there. One was, I'm not that familiar with him, but he wanted to do a holistic approach. That's a really challenging thing to go for. There's so many nuances to try to accomplish. Some of our colleagues there were saying, look, given its government, maybe just start chipping away at stuff, time after time. But he was committed to doing a holistic approach. I don't think he has a high enough, it's the committee, the guys that head the committees that drive the agenda on that. And I don't think he's head of any significant committee. You would want to be on banking committee or something like that would help to drive the agenda. But that was good to hear.
Yeah.
But the big takeaway was, I'm in California. Kevin McCarthy is a representative here from California. I'm a member of a group. We've known him for well over a decade, and we are politically affiliated with both Republicans and Democrats throughout the country, and we've had a good relationship with him. And I was trying to say at that fundraiser. I was concerned because when you have a new House leader of the party, and he's not necessarily from a district that is cannabis friendly, controlling the calendar of Congress really sets the agenda. And even if there's overwhelming support, if Mitch McConnell or Kevin McCarthy or whoever it is doesn't put it on the calendar to vote on, it never gets voted. And so I was concerned that now that he's from a conservative district, that we had one additional choke point that we didn't before, because previously when it was democratically controlled by Pelosi, it seemed to get to the calendar, for a floor vote every time.
Okay.
And so my point to him was, could be an issue. And he had reminded me of something I had heard about, procedural, but I didn't put it into context. And that I'll just reiterate what it was, is that Nancy Pelosi actually had a difficult time getting reelected herself.
Right.
There was so many factions within the Democratic Party that she was only able to get reelected by giving up some power. And that power is that with a simple majority in Congress, Congress can get something on the calendar with just a simple majority. So that was really good to hear, that we don't have an additional potential choke point with Kevin McCarthy, because he's from a conservative district and doesn't put it on the calendar for a floor vote. So this was all positive news, and I thought that was worth sharing the last time we spoke.
Interesting. Do you want to add to that, Ben?
Now, Rob, one of the positive takeaways that I have, even though it's still far away from a potential vote, is that the Senate Banking Committee decided to take this up very quickly, right? You have a regional banking crisis where, 4 or 5 regional banks have gone down over the past 3 or 4 weeks. We also have the debt ceiling that is ongoing right now, which should be taking up a lot of the committee's time, yet they chose to move quickly on this and to set a hearing for next Thursday, May 11th. So in your view, is that positive that the Senate Banking Committee decided to take this up so quickly with multiple banking crises around them?
Yeah.
I would say that, and I'm pretty pessimistic, that is a significant indicator because of the debt crisis, the macro environment of banking. The fact that it got pushed so quickly, that is a significant change. And then one other thing to throw in there is that fundraiser, the representative said, we need to go to Congress ourselves and really start pushing things. And so Jason and I have both offered to come out next Thursday, Jason Wild. And so, we're not going to go unless we can get, a meaningful spot to be able to give information. But we're happy to do that. And I think it's important that not only us, but all aspects of the industry start providing more color to Congress of what's really going on. I was just kind of curious, Signature Bank, First Republic were both cannabis-friendly banks. Most people don't know that. They weren't big ones, but they did have some cannabis deposits. And I'm just in the back of my head trying to think, what happens if a systemically important bank acquires a cannabis-friendly bank? And systemically important banks, as far as we know, none of them are willing to be in cannabis, and it's not because they can't be. I just think that they don't want to fiddle around with it. So I'm just curious, what did they absorb those tier 1 and tier 2 depositors, or did they require those to be moved off to somebody as quickly as possible? I reached out to
so a story within a story.
Yeah, I reached out to one of my good friends, Dana Chavez, who's in banking, to see if she could get any color on that. But these are just some of the machinations that happen behind the scenes that you're just, I'm just wondering might be something behind the scenes moving the ball more quickly than what we see up front,
That's interesting. Do you think that is going to have a play in ultimately a decision?
I don't think so.
No?
I think it's so infinitesimal. How I would look at it if I was acquiring a bank or if I was the regulators in that situation, I would absorb those deposits. They were already cleared. I wouldn't allow any new deposits to happen. Then I would make those depositors go to another bank within 30 days.
Now, Rob, putting aside the custody issues in the capital markets, where a lot of the bank brokerages divisions cannot custody the equity for client accounts, and that diminishes the investing potential or the investing base out there. Safe banking, like a lot of the safe banking, is available already to some of the larger companies, public companies, right? They already have a suite of banking services. So I know you deal with a lot of the private companies. Are they looking, from the people that you talk to, are they looking for safe banking to have access to better services out there,
So,
or do they not care?
yeah, I just want to take a step back. Safe banking, in reality, in my personal opinion, is a false canard out there. If you want to be in cannabis, whether you're tier 1, which is plant touching, or tier 2/3, which is ancillary, 15% of all the banks, 684 banks, are cannabis friendly banks. So there is banking and robust banking out there, and we've never seen a transaction in the more than 2,000 we've looked at that didn't have banking in place. So there, everybody's saying safe banking, we got to protect us, but in reality, that's not what's causing the issue. The issue is you can't process credit cards on the federal system. So what happens is that when you are in the dispensary where the first transaction, the beginning of the leg starts, you get this buildup of cash. And so you have this buildup of cash, and that's why the issue is there. So if they don't fix the credit card issue, you're still going to have an issue with cash.
So how do you fix the credit card?
Will the credit card issue get fixed? Because there's sort of a lot of debate on this.
Yeah,
Amex may not touch it until it's federally not illegal, and then some people think it might. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, so the credit cards and the custodial of shares, Fidelity, Schwab, and all that stuff, it's to be determined if the bill will give clearance or the ability to do those things. And for me, I don't bother reading the bills, getting into it, because the bills pass time and time and time again, and it's never what it's going to be ratified, which one the Senate passes one version, the House passes another, and then there's a conference between the two, and they ratify the differences. But generally, that's just the framework. Then it actually has to be worked out with experts and things, and then there's a comment period. So the actual rules, we won't know what those are. And then there's one more aspect to it. Just because it's possible and there's a way through, there's a morality and reputational risk to these institutions, and they still may not. They're not required to do it. They're not forced to do it, so they still may not do it. So Fidelity is infamous for not being willing to do to put things on their platform. Schwab is a little bit more flexible. We were approved with Schwab a couple of years ago. Yeah. We have our number issued, but they won't let us board any clients, and they won't give us the reason. And we're like, we got cleared at the highest level through every which way possible. Why can't we board somebody? And I think it's because it's a business decision that any cannabis investment is a no. And I think that because of the merger with TD, it was just complicating things. That one cannabis investment, even though it's ancillary, is approved.
Do you think? Do you think institutions view what do you mean institutional buying view safe banking the same way you kind of described how it's not really the solution? Therefore, if there is some sort of like passage with safe banking, that this still remains a retail play?
Well, kind of to take it a little bit further back. So institutions may not buy in whole and cloth into the whole thing yet. They might say, hey, it's still too early for us to be in.
Yeah.
There might be some players that are more aggressive, but just because you get these things in place, it's the institutional investors and capital that we need to come to the sector with velocity to sustain it and to take it to the next level. And even if we get these regulations, even if we get the custody shares, even if we get all that, it still will take time for those institutionals to start believing and understanding the space, because it's still emerging.
Right.
It's each one of these states is on a different timeline for its path through maturation to a fully stabilized market, and the regulations haven't been fully baked, and there's no historical history for the sector that you would normally have for this type of investment. It's all new. Yes, you can track the sales, you can track the taxes, but in reality, who's tracking the emergence of these markets? Yeah. Who's tracking how many of the population is able, what is the universe of the population that can smoke? What is the capacity for, how many square foot does that support? How many dispensaries does that all that information is still, it's still being developed, and it's changing. And in each market, it's different path, especially in a limited license as an unlimited license. So they may not be in a rush to go there.
Now, getting back to what you previously said, Rob, you said about 15% of banks are cannabis friendly and all that. So that makes me wonder, do you think there's sort of a misconception about safe banking out there and the importance of that with
Massively.
equity investors?
Yeah.
When you have congressmen saying that we've got to fix this, they're being robbed. Yes, they're being robbed. Yes, it's unsafe, but the causality is being missed. It's not that there's no banking. It's that the credit cards can't be processed so that you can reduce the amount of cash that is flowing through the system. So if the dispensary, has all this cash, then they pay everybody behind them with cash too, so they don't have to deal with it.
You're bingo on that as far as equity investors. This, as we've said from how many months, about being re-educated with a different approach, but there's a lot of unrealistic expectations as to what people think is going to prove out to be a big return on their investment, only to see a lot of these stocks down 90%. But outside of that, you'd mentioned that you're, at the event at Jason's place about advocating and going to Washington. You've spoken to Jason. Has there been some great feedback as far as notable names? I know you probably don't want to share who you've been speaking with, but do you think you'll get a good return if you do show up next week?
Well, we just started that dialogue last night.
Okay.
I haven't used my context. It's probably too short of notice to implement that, but I'll see. But I think it's important. I'm willing to make the time to do it. And I just want to make sure everybody realizes and knows I want nothing more than the equities to do well.
Right.
I want nothing more than the velocity of capital and the institutionals to come in and the custody of shares. I want all of those things to happen. And I think that a lot of people have thought that I'm against that or that I'm pessimistic. It is not that in any way. I'm just trying to be more realistic from my background. I have been around politics. I understand that side of how machinations of things get passed and don't get passed better than most retail investors would understand. I know the processes. And so I've utilized some of that information to form the ideas that I talk about.
Right.
And I hope that that's not taken as that I'm negative against that sector or the equities. I'm just trying to be realistic and just say that if your strategy is dependent on regulatory or reform to change, that's not a great spot to be because who knows what that timeline is. And number two, even when it does happen, generally in government, whatever they change doesn't necessarily get any better, and it has unintended consequences that might be worse. For example, if we were able to, somehow get 280E to not have to be filed on cannabis businesses, there might be an excise tax at the federal level that's put in place that might be more onerous. And so everybody would be like, yeah, we got 280E gone, but now we got this excise tax, and this is even worse. We had some workarounds, at least before, for some categories of the business. So these are just the points I'm just trying to make.
Yeah.
I think that this is a super long haul. The sector is not going away. The revenue is flowing through, and it's going to continue to flow through. I do think that there's enough revenue and money for everybody to do well. Some of my concerns have been, in that learning curve, so much money was spent in time, energy, OPEX, CAPEX, in trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. That's a large load that a lot of people are carrying forward. And some new operators might be able to come in today and say, hey, I'm going to enter. I mean, just think about it. I don't know what some of the largest companies have raised holistically from the beginning and just capital. But if you just started with that capital today, could you compete with them? Probably.
Yep.
Some people would say you can never, you need to be the first one in there. But there was a lot of capital that was spent trying to figure things out as this industry was scaling in each of these areas, and that's a loss.
Yep.
I think it's important that you noted, Rob, and I'm glad you did, about how there's some misconceptions about a private lender, how maybe they're down on equity. It's not necessarily the case, right? Because if safe banking goes through, if legalization goes through, I mean, you stand to benefit your fund because you have you have warrants, you have other companies that are going to be easier to come to market, which you have that in part of your deals and structure. So you benefit from that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Our cost of capital starts to come down significantly by probably 200 or 300 basis points immediately. We look forward to it. We anticipate it. It will happen. Is it in this administration or the next? We don't know.
Yeah.
And to what effect is that? For us, our strategy works whichever way it works in the current strategy, and it will still work once it moves once state policy becomes deconflicted from federal policy. That's the point I'm just trying to make.
So, question for both of you as you wrap this up: what's the big takeaway based on this May 11th hearing, Ben?
Well, for me, like I said earlier, the big takeaway is definitely that the fact that the Senate Banking Committee is moving quickly on this, right? You have a regional banking crisis, which is spreading. You have a debt ceiling, which hasn't been resolved yet. And those are two huge issues. Those aren't minor issues. And yet they chose to press ahead next week with that hearing, right? So at the very least, even though we still have a long, ways to go before a potential floor vote actually happens, at the very least, they're considering this important. That's what they're signaling to the market, that cannabis banking is an important issue. Whatever happens from that, I'm not sure, but at least it's on the radar with a lot of powerful people.
I would agree with that. I was shocked that this got moved that quickly. And I was also, the other part is it's both the House and the Senate. So that's massive.
Yeah. Timeline wise, if there is a vote on this, what realistically, when stuff like this works, what do we look at, Rob?
Well, it just depends on what's going on, and how far apart are they on the ratification between those two versions of the bill, and then we're coming into an election, and do we lose that momentum as we go into that election cycle? So I'm seriously can't believe that they moved this meeting to next Thursday. So I think that's a really significant positive sign. And it would be awesome if one party or the other, used this legislation as part of the horse trading that happens in the background to get some of the other things done, such as the debt ceiling and things like that.
Now, I'll just add that one of the biggest lobbyists for the sector, Don Murphy, I think I saw a tweet this morning. He pegged a timeline of July 4th. I'm not sure how he got to that. So I think if we can get a vote before the summer recess, which happens in August, that would be a huge win for the industry. And that would look good that, maybe they're negotiating and putting things through at a good level, right? So that's what I'm looking at.
That would be awesome. And I follow him, and he's the one that said, if you guys want to come out here. So if we hear back from him, and if he can get us something where it's meaningful for us to make the time, Jason and I are both willing to do it.
Perfect. Next week's podcast, you and Jason are on to find out what went down next Thursday. Best of luck with that. Perfect. But I hope you obviously get a good turnout. And I know the network that both of you have, and I'm sure it'll be a strong one. But keep us posted. And I think we need to get our film crew with these guys and follow them, Ben, next week.
I was thinking if we did get some traction, it would be awesome to have you come along with us and get some live, let's get some real feedback, because it's one thing to get the information from a lobbyist. It's a different to get it directly from the sources.
Yep.
Because you want to talk to each one of those people might have a completely different viewpoint, even though they're in the same party. And it's really important to understand that. And it's also, you got to kind of know what their standing is. Are they a committee, the head of a committee that really is influential? Or are they just a vote?
Okay. Well, leave a comment below.
And
do you want?
One other thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Are they a vote that was previously a no and now they're a yes?
Right.
That's significant. Even a insignificant, legislator, if they were previously a different way and now they're flipping, that's significant.
All right. Well, viewers, I think we got signed up for a trip. Leave a comment below and let us know if you want us to go and catch along the ride with Jason and Rob. I think, Ben, we're going to have to dust off our passports. People are going to want to see that. That's for sure. Anyways, listen, appreciate the time. And after this podcast, let's reconvene about possibly following you guys around next week. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.